Alright, so for episode 26 of this game, we are now going to make a start with the professional events, because I figured now was probably a good time for me to do so. And I think to open them up, I'm gonna start them off by using... You know what, yeah, because I have money to spend, I want to use the Turismo 270R for this. I think, anyway. Yeah, let's use the Turismo, and we'll get some tuning done on this thing along the way, because, well, I do have money to spend. Also because, well, I figured why not. Also because, well, this thing technically is normally aspirated, or natural aspiration, I think is what it is. So, let's go. Opening the professional events with the Turismo 270R. And of course, we can either head to Nissan, which is right there, or we can head to the... Oh, we cannot head to the tuning car manufacturers. Unless Turismo isn't in there. Oh, okay. Must not be one of those cars then. Yeah, there are certain cars where we can actually head down to the tuning car manufacturer in order to get parts and pieces fitted. Oh, okay. This thing must be a turbo then. I stand corrected. We are now all set with the Turismo 270R, and I have spent 52 grand on this thing. Okay, on now to the professional events. Oh, it's the Clubman Cup we start off with. Yeah, you can probably tell why this does not sit well with me. Okay, so the Clubman Cup must be first. Oh well. At least I've got myself ready for the championship event, which I could have started off with, but... Oh well, Clubman Cup first, I guess. You know what, let's use the Type 2 Mazda RX-8 for our first one, because I figured why not. I've got myself set up for the tuning car championship already, so I don't think we'll have too many problems here. Even though I accidentally prepared myself for the wrong event, but that's by the by. So let's begin with the Clubman Cup, where if we win, we will get 3,000 credits for each of these races, as we head to Apricot Hill, Twin Ring Motegi, Seoul Central, which is in South Korea, also Clubman Stage Route 5 and Deep Forest Raceway. And where for most of these we're doing 3 laps, but for the other two we are doing 4 and 5 laps respectively. So let's begin at Apricot Hill. Alrighty, so in terms of our competition, we've got a Toyota MR2, a Peugeot 205, Opel Speedster, Honda Integra, and a Renault Clio as our competition for race 1. I'm convinced in saying that I do have enough horsepower to get the job done. I just need to turn off the driver aids, of course, because I don't need those. And let's go. For 3 laps of Apricot Hill, even though I accidentally prepared myself for the wrong event. But let's go. And pretty individual in terms of colour choices as well, I might add. And 111 points. So, here we go. And a little bit of wheel spin off the launch, but that's expected. And ironically, the Type 2 Mazda RX-8 would also become the final design, as I've mentioned before, for the Mazda RX-8 when it went into the production assembly in 2003. And then it would basically stay there up until they discontinued it in 2012. Which, from what I know at least, was also the last time that Mazda technically used a rotary engine. So 2.3 seconds is the gap to the Toyota out in front. I'm convinced in saying I should be able to catch him. And got a little bit feisty there between the Opel and the Renault, but I did of course manage to stay out of their way. I let them get on with their business. And now I'm trying to clear the Peugeot 205 that is up ahead of me. He did close the door on me, as I would have expected, but I am of course able to get down the inside, and the 205 has got loose. He now falls to 4th position as I'm slowly catching up to the Toyota out front. I'm convinced in saying this is going to be quite a tussle when I do manage to catch up to him. Because in the Pro Series, well, for want of a better phrase, we are going up against some tuned cars. From this event on out, through to the other professional series events that we're doing, and so far, this event has been pretty close. And I can definitely hear the screams of that Felix Wankel rotary engine, or just the Wankel rotary engine in general, as I now take over the lead here at Apricot Hill. And up to this point, we're doing okay. Even though I probably should have checked what event it was we were doing first before I immediately spent all my money on the fucking Nismo 270R. But I'm convinced in saying I should be okay. And I'm also convinced in saying that the Mazda RX-8 was the right choice for this event. I have a feeling there's going to be a sense of irony here. Well, the Toyota is keeping up pretty close, so it is fair to say this is definitely a close race. In spite of me not having any tuning on the car. He's trying to close in again, but I think I've got enough of a gap to hold him off. So it's fair to say that this race is going to be a close one, from what I can see, as he's closing in again. Probably let go of the throttle there for a little bit too long, but still able to hold on to my lead. I get a bump from behind, trying to get forced to the outside, and it looks like the Opel was trying to go for a manoeuvre there, but it was not going to work for him, because I pretty much had the door closed. And this is definitely a close race. There's no question about that. I'm really having to battle here to keep a hold of every scrap I possibly can. And I gotta say, I've got some worthy opponents here, as we head through the chicane now for the last time, and we're both very much making door-to-door contact, but we do at least manage to keep ourselves on the racetrack and on the final stretch, and I win what has been a thrilling first race of the Clubman Cup. 8 tenths in the end over the Toyota MR2. That was definitely a hard-fought race. There's no question about that. But there we go. Race 1 is done. And I gotta say, certainly a competitive race, to say the least. But I just held off the MR2 GTS by less than a second. Then the Opel Speedster came third, Renault Clio fourth, Peugeot 205 in fifth, and it was the Honda Integra Type R DC5 that finished in sixth and last. And a quite distant last, I might add. So this time we've got a Renault Clio starting on the pole, along with a Mitsubishi Eclipse GT from, ironically, 2006. Also got the Lotus Carlton, the Lotus Elise, and a Honda Prelude at the rear of the field, aside from me. And not quite as many points as before, as this time we'll only score 100, but either way, scoring 100 points is still a hell of a lot. And I think it's fair to say that we're going to be in for another pretty close race from what I can see. I think it was when I got loose on the straight when I was trying to defend my position, and then that was ultimately what costed me the win in the end. Oh well, let's try again. Okay. So, one thing I've now established is that Lotus Elise is fast. And I mean damn fast. Because right there at the end, when I got loose on the straight, I thought for sure I had it in the bag, but then right at the end, he just snatched it from me. Right in the dying crutches of the race. Basically, the closing tenths of the race, he just got me. And passing the Integra again, still a little dirtier than what I would have liked, but I had to get my car up the inside, because I now know how fast that Lotus Elise really is when it's in clean air. As I now pass the Lotus Carlton, and I also know this race is going to be a close quarter one as well. Had to basically force myself through there on the Eclipse. Not the way I would have wanted to do it, but I still did it anyway. And sometimes there are just some maneuvers you have to go for, and other ones not so much. And it looks like the Lotus Elise is now clear of the Eclipse. I've really got to make sure that I do not make the same mistake I did last time. And I've really got to be on the pace if I am going to beat that Lotus Elise. Because he basically just mowed down the gap the last time, as soon as he cleared the Renault Clio that is now in front of me. I thought for sure I was clear for the win, but then he just got me after I got loose on the final stretch. And in all honesty, I would say the Elise beat me fair and square. I'm not convinced in saying that the Elise cheated to get the win. I'm strongly convinced in saying that he beat me fair and square. And whenever someone does beat me fair and square, I will willingly accept that. It's called sportsmanship, if you're asking. Sometimes I tend to be all-encompassing of it, other times not so much. But I will be willing to accept when an opponent has beaten me fair and square. And that's pretty much what the Elise did. So I'm really going to have to make sure that I go a bit more aggressive than what I did last time. Because 3.75 seconds, that's going to be nothing by the time we get to the end of the next lap. Because he's going to mow down that gap. Because that's just how fast he is. And right at the end he actually got me as well. On the previous attempt. So he's really going to no doubt get the hammer down for this last lap. So 3.6 seconds is the gap. Of course, I know that's probably going to be almost absolutely nothing by the time we get to the end of this lap. He fought me hard and he fought me well. Looks like this finish is going to be very similar to what it was on my previous attempt. But hopefully, if it's possible this time at least, I will manage to come out the other way. In other words, I'll manage to successfully defend my lead. And he's not coming up on me as fast as I thought he was going to. So I'm going to assume he must have damage or something. Which would explain why he's not closing in on me as fast as he was before. He must have damage or something. But I don't know for sure. Guess we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so he's closing in by tenths, but not by seconds. I really thought for sure he was gonna be right on my ass by the time we got to this last hairpin. I really thought for sure he was gonna do what he did last time, and that's force me into a mistake. But doesn't look like it's gonna happen this time around. It'll be close, but not quite as close as it was last time. 2.7 seconds in the end over the Lotus. So he did close in, but he didn't close in as quickly as he did before. And I'm going to assume that must have been because he had damage or something, which is why he wasn't quite as fast as he was before. Well, it's still more money, so I'm okay with it. You know, I think if that was actually as close as my first attempt was, that probably would have been the perfect clickbait shot. With me basically duking it out with the Lotus. And we've got a almost completely different field this time, as we've got a Mazda RX-7 FD, an Alfa Romeo GT V6, and a Dodge SRT4, aside from an Opel Speedster and another Lotus Elise. So something tells me this is going to be even harder to win than my first attempt. Well, at least the first race was, because I really had to go tooth and nail in that first race. And this one I reckon is going to be even harder, because I have my rotary counterpart to fight against. And also because, well, we're more spread out than we were before. So that means I'm going to have to push it even harder than I did before. Or maybe not, because it looks like the two convertibles were held up by the Alfa Romeo, and hopefully that gives me enough time to potentially go for a pass on both of them. And the deep purple Lotus Elise, yes, that is what the colour of that Lotus is. And get into the back of him just a little bit there, but able to still come away with the lead, even though it was not through the way I wanted it to be. But that's okay, because I am closing in on my rotary counterpart, and the Lotus is going to pass me. So 2.7 seconds is the gap to the Mazda RX-7. And, oh, yep, I forced the Lotus into the wall there. Not quite the way I was wanting that to go down, but, well, at least I cleared the bastard. Because he was going to go for a pass on me, and if he was on the inside, he most likely would have done the same thing to me, so I'd say that's pretty fair and just, personally. It's hard to say who realistically would have won that battle, but I certainly feel like that if the Lotus was in the same position I was in, there's no question in saying that he would have done the same thing to me if he was on the inside line. He would have most likely forced me into the wall. As I now close in on my rotary brother, that of course being the FD, as you can see up ahead. And I really don't know where the Lotus is right now. Well, he's still in this race at least. He is still competing, of course, but this time with the Opel Speedster. Looks like we're very much going to be in for what looks like another nail-biter. Because the gaps do appear to be pretty close. Even though I do have a 1.8 second gap over the Mazda at this stage. So heading round the roundabout, and now heading back up the street once again. I do have a big enough gap to at least believe that winning is definitely possible, as I now have a 2.4 second gap out front. And I gotta say, the Opel is definitely giving the Mazda a run for his money. Still, I gotta say, this race has been pretty good altogether. Not quite the barn burner that we had at Apricot Hill, but still a pretty good race nonetheless, because I did have to fight hard to get the race lead, and it looks like the Elise has now cleared the Opel, and running a little bit wide there through the roundabout section, but still able to at least hold on to my position. And it looks like it's going to be 3 wins. Well, 2 out of 3 races I think that I've now won first try. And in spite of that contact I made with the Lotus, he came back to finish in second. So, as I said before, the Lotus is definitely quick when he doesn't have damage. And I kind of did damage him in that incident, but I'm convinced in saying he would have done the same to me, so hard to say for sure, but I'd say it's borderline over who exactly is at fault. I'd say it's just racing. Just another one of those racing deals, personally. So, 3.1 seconds over the Lotus Elise. The Mazda RX-7 FD came home 3rd, then the Opel 4th, the Alfa Romeo 5th, and it was the Dodge SRT 4 who came home 6th and last. And you know what? I think I'm going to save this one, because I don't have a replay saved in Soul yet. I figured this might as well be the time to do it. Even then, of course, if I did accidentally prepare myself for the wrong event initially. But whatever. That is now another replay saved. And now we have just 2 races to go. And in this field, we've got 2 Hondas, 1 Dodge, and 1 Lotus with 1 Mitsubishi. This time we have the Evo 3. As the Dodge SRT4 starts on the pole here at Clubman Stage Route 5. And a few less points than what we got at Apricot Hill. I think we scored 111 last time in the first race. Then in the second race we scored 100, and in the previous race we scored 131. But altogether, the racing for this event, it's been very close. If you're wanting my personal preference, it's definitely been pretty close, is what I would think. As I already move up into 4th position, pulling off a double pass as I went through the exit of the tunnel. And now closing in on the Integra. A little bit of contact in the rear there, but able to at least get the position. He did fight me hard for it, but I did clear him. We were very much nip and tuck in that altercation. And passing the Dodge from the outside, he tries to shut the door on me, but he's not going to. And we're definitely side by side as we head down the stretch. He's got a little bit more speed than me, but I did have the inside entry for the tunnel, and it looks like I will come away with the lead over the Dodge. I believe that's also the same Dodge that we saw last time out in Seoul as well, if I'm not mistaken, because he was a very distant last the last time I saw him. And this time, he starts on the pole. Unfortunately, he does not really put up much of a fight after the tunnel on this lap. But anyway. We move on. As I now have a 6-second lead over the Dodge SRT4. And unfortunately the rest of the competition is not really putting up much of a battle at the moment, in terms of closing in on me. And you know what? I kind of needed this sort of race. So, it's fair to say that I'm gonna come away with this one pretty easily, from what I can see. Yeah, 10.3 seconds. I'm strongly convinced in saying the field is not gonna catch back up to me now. Because I am very much setting the pace here at CSR 5. Yeah, 11.6. I'm convinced in saying no one is going to make it to the finish before me, because that's just how far ahead I am of everyone else. Plus, because this is pretty much a short track, I'm honestly not surprised to say that I'm leading by this much, because my competition is not really able to keep up with me, unfortunately. I did have some battles, but not really enough to actually put up the dukes and battle me for the win here. I'm convinced in saying I could have used the DeLorean for this and I might have still won this race if I really wanted to. Of course I'm not going to, because, well, I stuck with the Mazda, but that's not to say the DeLorean wouldn't have been on the cards. I would have considered it, if I really wanted to use it. And it looks like no one is going to make it to the finish line before the fade, because everyone appears to be off the pace. Or at least the rest of the field seems to be slower than the Dodge SRT4, who does still have quite a gap. Up at the front. But there we go. A comfortable win at CSR 5. And 97 points. Yeah, that race was pretty underwhelming once I took the lead altogether. But in all honesty, I kind of needed that, because the first 3 races were definitely close ones. Unfortunately, the only one of those 3 good races that I can really say had a profound impact on the episode altogether will probably be Apricot Hill, because that was definitely the closest in terms of margins per car. Anyway, time now for Deep Forest. Alright, final race of the Clubman Cup, and it takes place at Deep Forest, and where we have got the Fiat Coupe Turbo Plus, a Honda S2000, an Alfa Romeo 147, a Mazda RX-7 FD, and a Mercedes 190e Evo 2. Okay, here we go. And it is a rolling start, and this time it is 94 points if we win. So something tells me this is going to be pretty easy, the way I see things. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Well, I can certainly say the Merc 190e doesn't sound any differently than what it did the last time I used it. Although I'm going to assume that must be because the Merc 190e already has tuning on it. So, going round the Alfa 147. And now, closing in on the Fiat up front. I'm pretty convinced in saying this is not going to be too hard to win. From what I can see. I do very much appear to be the faster car here than the Fiat, as he forces me onto the curbs, but that's okay, because I still pass him from the outside anyway. And now I just have to wait and see how long it is before the Mazda gets involved in this. If he does. Since he's probably going to be my closest opponent here. If he manages to get past the cars that are surrounding him at the moment. And I think he's already done that, so maybe this race isn't over just yet. But either way, we'll wait and see. As I head through the first tunnel, and now heading through the second tunnel. Gap is 6.5 seconds to the Fiat now, because it looks as though he will probably be my closest opponent unless the FD manages to pull off some passing. But as ever, we'll wait and see. So I head through the 4th tunnel. Gap is now 10.6 seconds to the Fiat. Doesn't look like the Mazda is really going to eat into my gap. He's probably being held up, the way I see it. Most likely. As I now head through the first hairpin now for the 3rd and last time. 14-second gap to the Fiat, so I think it's fair to say, compared to the first 3 races, the other 2 races, they've been pretty piss easy from what I can see. Because I've noticed there has not really been anyone contending with me for the race win. And now it's the Honda S2000 that takes over 2nd place, and that's a wall. Probably don't really need to go any harder than what I'm already going at this stage, because I just have such a huge lead out front that it probably doesn't really matter anymore. The way I see things, I'm practically just so relaxed and hollow at this point that it's honestly impossible to imagine me losing this race now. Unless something catastrophic happens, but that's not the case. Yeah, the Mazda was just held up for most of that race, and he did manage to pass the Fiat in the end, so he'll probably come home 3rd. And that's about it. So, 51 minutes later, and after going through 3 pretty good and close races, to say the least, the last 2 races turn out to be pretty quiet, if I do say so myself. One of those I kind of needed, but the other one, not so much. I think if the Mazda RX-7 was starting up front, he would have given me more of a battle, but unfortunately that wasn't what happened. Anyway, there we go. The Clubman Cup is now ours, in spite of me accidentally thinking it was the Tuning Car Grand Prix that came home first. And for winning this one, we get the Mazda 6 MPS. I'm pretty sure this is another Mazda Atenza. But either way, that's our first prize from winning the Pro Series. And now, we must prepare ourselves for the Tuning Car Grand Prix, which, of course, I will probably show as being a sped up segment for the next episode. But there we go. So that was the Clubman Cup. Now let's go and check our stats, as we've moved up another 0.8%, so we're up to 13.5% of progress. And here is the car that we won, the Mazda 6 MPS in Snowflake White Pearl Mica. And we cannot sell this thing, so it must be another concept. Oh well, it's fine. Some cars I probably don't need to sell anyway, so I'd say we're Gucci in that department. But either way, there we go. Mazda 6 MPS. And next up will be the Tuning Car Grand Prix, coming in the next episode of GT4.